As we continue through this Chapter 1 review, we get to absolute value equations. And when we solve absolute value equations, we talk through what we want to do. We want to isolate the absolute value. So you should know these things as you walk through. Isolate the absolute value. That means get the part with the absolute value by itself. Next, we split the absolute value into two parts. We've always talked about how we have the positive part and the negative part. And then we're going to solve each part. And we can check. Now I should interject something here right in this step. Before we split into two parts, observe to determine if the answer is no solution. And that is referring to an absolute value. If you have an absolute value equaling a negative. Well, if you take the absolute value of something, absolute value equaling a negative, an absolute value never equals a negative, and so something like that would be no solution. So that's something you just want to look at before you split into two parts. It can save you a lot of time. So here we go, number 20. I know I just got rid of our steps, but you know what they say, hopefully. You want to isolate the absolute value. We do that. Here's the absolute value in these green lines right here. We want to get that by itself. So this plus 2 is in the way, so we subtract 2. And now we have the absolute value of n over 9 equals 1. The next part says split into two equations. We leave this first one as is. So we're taking the absolute value, and we're thinking, well, this absolute value is just equal to itself because it's positive. But it could be negative, so the absolute value would be equal to its opposite. You just put an opposite out here. And then you solve these individually. Multiply by 9, because n is being divided by 9, so multiply both sides by 9. We get n equals 9. Over on the other one, we have a negative here, so we could multiply both sides by negative 9. Negative times a negative is positive, and 9 cancels with 9, so we have n equals, and I don't know why I have this one right here as a negative 1. That is not how we've been working through here. We have the negative, so it should have looked like the opposite is equal to 1. So this should be a 1. And we're multiplying that by negative 9. So we get negative 9. Let's go ahead and check. Looks like our answers are 9 and negative 9. Putting it back in. 9 over 9 plus 2. Does that in fact equal 3? Well, 9 over 9 is 1. The absolute value of 1 is 1 plus 2 is 3, so that works. What about when we put in negative 9? Well, you know what? That works too. Because negative 9 over 9 is negative 1, but the absolute value of negative 1 is 1, and 1 plus 2 is 3. So both answers are correct, so we can say n equals negative 9, or 9. 21, first step, isolate the absolute value. Let's do the observation step. Remember, it says observe to see if an absolute value equals a negative, because then you would have no solution. Does this say an absolute value equals a negative? No. It says the absolute value equals 3. So now we split it into two parts. We leave it as is without the absolute value. This would be if 4 minus k was a positive. And then we think, well, if it was an opposite or a negative, we would have to do the opposite of 4 minus k. is 3. So you need to know how to split it up into two parts. You just take the equation as is without the absolute values, and then for the second part, you do the opposite, which is the negative of that. And then you just solve these two simple things. We subtract 4 from both sides. Negative k equals -1. Divide both sides by -1. And you get k equals 1. Over here, we can distribute this negative. -4 plus k equals 3. Add 4 to both sides. And you get k is equal to 7. We can check our answers once again. Put in a 1 back into the original. -7 plus 4 minus 1. Does that equal -4? We got -7 plus 4 minus 1 is 3. The absolute value of 3 is 3. Yep, that works. Now put 7 in there. So k equals 1 works. Now try k equals 7. -7 plus the absolute value of 4 minus 7. Does that, in fact, equal -4? Well, this is -7 plus the absolute value of -3. Absolute value of -3 is 3. -7 plus 3 does equal -4. So they both work. So k equals 1 or k equals 7. Now I moved this one down so I'd have more room. And then I actually threw in a 22b because I wanted to show you something. But first of all, we isolate the absolute value. The absolute value is being divided by 3, so we do the inverse by multiplying by 3. That gives us the absolute value of x minus 6 equals 3. And once again, we can split this into two parts. First of all, it's not an absolute value equals a negative, so there are solutions. So write it as is. X minus 6 equals 3, and then do the opposite of x minus 6 equals 3. Solve these two little equations, add 6 to both sides, so x equals 9. Distribute, -x plus 6 equals 3. Subtract 6 from both sides, it's -3, and divide both sides by -1, and you get x equals 3. Try it out. Put them in to check them. Putting back into the original. 9 minus 6 is 3. The absolute value of 3 is 3. Divided by 3 is 1. That works. Try 3. 3 minus 6 is -3. Absolute value is 3 divided by 3, so they both work. X equals 9 or 3. And then the last one from this section, the one I just made up and threw in there, we want to isolate the absolute value. Oh, it's a a 2x in there. We would subtract 4 from both sides. Probably should have said that's what I was doing first. Equals -2. We're going to observe this to see, do we have an absolute value equal to a negative? We actually do. This is impossible. An absolute value will always be positive. So this one is no solution. And there you have it.